Hey everyone, and welcome to Two Steps Forward, where sustainability meets business reality.
We know that making more sustainable choices, that is, again, a mega trend that is coming, right? It's growing every day. And if we don't keep pace with that trend, right, that's not serving our business, that's not serving our customers, that's not serving the merchants and the cardholders.
I'm Joel McCower, and that was Ellen Jackowski, Chief Sustainability Officer at Mastercard. More from Ellen in a bit, but first let me say hi to my co-host and friend Solitaire Townsend. Hey, Soli.
Hey, Joel. How you doing?
Oh, we in the sustainability community, this happened during the last administration of our current president here in the United States. We stopped asking, how are you doing? We just started saying, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Joel. I hope you're holding on that roller coaster.
So far, knuckles are white, but holding on tight.
One of the things which I was hoping we were going to get to talk about a bit today is greenwash. This is such a debate here in Europe at the moment, with some of the greenwash rules pending, but with at the same time us being in this massive green hush moment of fewer and fewer people talking about sustainability issues. It's not gone away, but it has gone down. And I was wondering, is that an issue for you? Are you hearing a lot about that at the moment?
About greenwash itself?
And green hush, and basically what happened to talking about sustainability?
Yeah, what happened indeed. Well, those two terms certainly are part of the conversation, at least in the sustainability community. I'm someone who does not think that greenwash is the problem that it's made out to be. I just don't think that it's a problem. In fact, I think, and I wrote about this some time ago, that it's kind of the fake news or woke, which is to say that it's a term you apply to something that to dismiss it. And it can be something based on facts, but often it's based on something that just doesn't feel right.
Let me probe that a little bit, because I actually have quite similar views, but I've been challenged on that. So, here in the UK, we had a situation where one of the big oil companies was doing a huge amount of spend, literally spending millions on talking about the work that it was doing on renewable energy, and it had posters in local areas about the work it was doing on renewable energy, even though that is such a tiny part of their business. And they got pulled up by the government to say you cannot put so much effort into talking about renewable energy when your energy mix shows that it's such a small part. Isn't that greenwash? Isn't that damaging?
Absolutely. And I'm not saying that there is not greenwash. And those examples, British Petroleum, Beyond Petroleum, BP, back a decade or more ago, that was probably the quintessential greenwash in terms of saying something, just getting way ahead of their skis. Beyond Petroleum was never more than a fraction of 1% of BP's revenue. And so, yeah, absolutely, a VW and their clean diesel emissions. There are scandals, to be sure, but that's not, at least here on this side of the Atlantic, not how greenwash is. The only way greenwash is used. It's anything that a company says that, again, it feels like it isn't true. But I guess my question is, where does marketing stop and greenwash begin? Because marketing's always talked about in hyperbole. Kashi, the breakfast cereal, is all natural. Well, it contains artificial ingredients. Vitamin water reduces the risk of eye disease, it says. Well, that's unproven. Red Bull gives you wings. Really? Oh, come on. Yeah. So we see those kinds of things, and we typically just wave them off and say, oh, that's just marketing. But when it comes to the environment, everything is scrutinized. Every claim, every remark is looked at. And my take is that what is often called greenwash is much more sloppy than sinister, which is to say that it's companies that are just saying things without checking them out or thinking about them, and as opposed to companies that are saying, let's really try and fool people here. So I'm not one who thinks that greenwash is rampant. Yes, there absolutely are cases like the petroleum company that you referenced and several others that are just blatant, but that's not the majority.
I'm 100% with you. I often say that you've got malicious greenwash, where there is an intent to deceive where that is quite literally almost as if it's, we have different degrees of, we've got murder 1 and murder 2 and manslaughter. We almost need kind of that kind of hierarchy with greenwash, which is where there is premeditated attempt to deceive. That is, first degree greenwash. Second degree greenwash might be where there is obvious greenwash. It is lying, but it wasn't an attempt to manipulate. It was just stupid or mistaken. And then you've got, should we say, like kind of, not greenwash, but maybe kind of green tint, which is when there actually isn't anything wrong with what they're saying. There isn't anything which technically breaks the rules, but perhaps it just doesn't pass the gut check for someone who's got their antenna super, super sensitized to it. And I'm the same. I feel like that a lot of effort is spent on second degree greenwash and on green tint, and whereas actually what we should be doing is focusing on first degree greenwash, malicious greenwash, and literally banning it, and perhaps saving some of our efforts away from some of the softer forms.
Yeah, well let's start with a definition here, because I was looking at the European Union's Green Claims Directive, which is arguably the most robust regulation to address misleading green claims, and it defines greenwash as, quote, the practice of giving a false impression of the environmental impact or benefits of a product which can mislead consumers, unquote. A false impression. I mean, that's so highly subjective, for one thing. Was the company outright lying, first degree, or did it oversimplify an environmental attribute because while trying to make it easier to understand to the average consumer? Did consumers misinterpret the claim because they're ill-informed or fed misinformation? Was the company stating an aspirational goal backed by incremental improvements towards a big, hairy, audacious goal that it hasn't yet met but is on track? So, where do we draw those lines? And I think it's just become lazy on the part of the environmental sustainability community to just say greenwash. And that's what I mean. It's sort of the fake news. It's like dismiss it. Doesn't feel right to me. Fake news. And now we just use that as greenwash.
And one of the negatives of this is that it's disinclining companies and marketers to talk about sustainability. And I think that there was a CEO, I can't remember who it was recently, who said that they were more worried about greenhush than about greenwash. Because when you think about communicating sustainability to the public, that's overwhelmingly being done by businesses in terms of the amount of spend, in terms of the amount of effort, in terms of the amount of opportunities to see. It's actually being done by brands talking about the fact that sustainability matters. We know you care about green and we know you care about ethical, and so we're selling to you. Dial that down, make companies less inclined to try to talk about the environmental and social attributes of their products, and suddenly we lose a huge amount of the communications telling the public that we care about sustainability. So I'll go right out there and I will echo the CEO who said I'm far more concerned about greenhushing than I am about greenwashing, and that actually it's probably no surprise that we are seeing some issues with public sentiment about sustainability just at the moment when companies have stopped talking about it. So I want to go after malicious first degree greenwash with everything we've got, not just banning it. I want there to be laws where there's literally kind of legal consequences for CEOs for maliciously attempting to use advertising to lobby on behalf of their business in a way that has absolutely no substantiating. But the immediate attack on anything which might not 100% meet with environmentalists' views of what good is, I get a little bit less angry about that, and actually sometimes angry in the other way.
Well, yeah, I'm just not even sure how much what's this expression, the juice is worth the squeeze around greenwash, because I think it's a distraction from really holding companies accountable for the significant improvements that companies need to make around, carbon and waste and toxics and energy use and ecosystem destruction, and in some cases social equity and issues around that. By focusing on these small ball marketing claims that companies make, and again, there are some blatant first degree greenwash that we must look at, but just spending too much time on that and not enough on just getting companies to do more, to go further, faster. I've long railed against the sort of greenwash obsession that we have in the environmental community. I think we should absolutely call companies out, but I also think we should say 5 words that we just don't say when companies do things. Thank you. Now do more. I mean, we may say this, the last 3 of those, do more, the last two of those words, but rarely, and this may be to your point, Soli, that, thank you. That's great. It's just a start, though. Now keep going. And, what happens is companies do things, and this stuff, as you know really well, Soli, is hard. I always talk about the fact that Starbucks took damn near a decade to get 10% post-consumer fiber in their coffee cups. It wasn't for lack of trying. They worked with the Dixies and the Solos and all those cup manufacturers that provide them their cups, but figuring out how to do it at a price, that at a performance, you have to pass government scrutiny in the United States, because anytime recycled content touches food, the FDA at least used to get involved, and a bunch of other issues that I'm probably not thinking about. Of course, the aesthetics and the customer experience have to be part of that. It took a long time for 10%. And so how do we think about that? Do we thank them and say that was an amazing achievement? Thank you for sticking with it and getting there, now do more? Or do we just say, how dare you talk about this stuff? It took you 10 years and it's only 10%. This is where I honestly don't know. And maybe there's a good cop, bad cop thing that needs to happen among the sustainability folks. But I just find this kind of perplexing.
I think perhaps we do have a little bit of both going on, though, because there are lots of awards that we give in sustainability. There's lots of platforms where people can talk about the amazing work that they've done, where they get clapped. I've seen you post a few of them. There's a lot of salaries that people get paid in this field, which are much higher than in the NGO field. So I think that as long as we're still giving awards and writing articles and platforming and learning from and doing lists of the most influential people in sustainability based on what they've done, I think it is okay to also constantly challenge, because of course they wouldn't have got to that 10% at all if they hadn't been pushed. So it is a bit of a balance of both. But just come back to the greenwash piece for a second. I think one of the biggest challenges with all of this is actually the idea of claims at all. So I do a lot of this with marketing teams. So I go into marketing teams, we work with the CMO and their team and with some of their agencies, and we go through and they ask us to check all of their claims. And I sit there and go, well, some of these I think are right. Let's see whether you've got the justification. Show me the dossier of all the evidence that you have for this. But by the way, others might not, because greenwash tends to be a gut check rather than actually a legal check for some people. But why are you making claims anyway? What have claims ever done for you? Prove to me that making a claim about a 10% reduction or a 15% improvements, or this is recyclable, prove to me that that is going to make your consumer take action. Because actually, claims, even the idea of making claims, almost puts you in greenwash territory to begin with. What you're trying to do is get the consumer to celebrate what you've done, to tell you, thank you, well done. And although the environment community might do that, the sustainability community might do that, I tell you, someone who never says thank you is consumers. And so literally by being in the can we make a claim about our environmental performance, you're automatically in the space where it's going to come across as greenwash, even if it's not. It's going to sound like hubris, it's going to sound like boasting, it's going to sound like overclaiming, it's going to sound like you're trying to convince somebody of something, it's going to sound like my lady doth protest too much, even if that's not the case. Whereas if you start thinking about how can I help my consumer live a better life? How can I offer my consumer a benefit, emotional benefit, a functional benefit from the environment? How can I make her the hero of taking action on sustainability rather than asking her to celebrate me the hero? Immediately that mindset change keeps you out of greenwash. And so I think that if you've got a problem with greenwash, if you're scared of greenwash, then stop writing down claims and start thinking about how you can help your consumer live the life that she wants to live and how you can help her be the hero of sustainability. Sustainable consumption rather than sustainability claims.
Well, that's a great lead into our conversation today with Ellen Jackowski. We're going to talk about sustainable consumption and the role that financial institutions like Mastercard can play. So let's tune in.
When you think of the most fascinating and challenging sectors for sustainability, financial services is probably going to come pretty high on that list. Now, our guest today, Ellen Jackowski, is, in my opinion, the standout leader in the sector. As Chief Sustainability Officer of Mastercard, in just a few short years, she's helped them pioneer approach to using financial services to inspire, inform, and enable change at a mass scale. I hope we're going to hear a bit more about that today. Ellen, it's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Soli. Excited to be here.
Welcome, Ellen. It's great to see you. When people think about a financial institution or let's call it a credit card company, I know you're more than that, but that's how most people think of Mastercard. And sustainability, I'm not sure people understand the fullness of all that. Talk a little bit about your remit at Mastercard.
Sure. When you think about, who Mastercard is, right? We have over 150 million points of acceptance on our network. So 150 million places all around the world where you can use your Mastercard. Thousands of banking partners and over 3.5 billion cards in circulation. So when you think about 8 billion people on the planet, and we have 3.5 billion cards in circulation, we have a very unique opportunity to help accelerate the transition to more sustainable, regenerative economy. And so I think, while of course we have a net zero goal, net zero by 2040, and we're making very good progress against that goal, our carbon footprint is relatively small for the size of the company that we are. So the biggest opportunity we have, again, is to, as Soli said, inspire, inform, and enable. And those words are very intentional. We've spent a lot of time thinking about the appropriate role that we can play to help this transition.
I really want to get into some of that because there's so much that that when we think about how many touch points I just have in my own life using my Mastercard out and about in the world and how that could affect me. But I want to ask you a question about the moment we're in at the moment. It feels like everything is changing. The climate is changing, our politics are changing, the requirements of business are changing. How do we best meet this moment? How are you meeting this very, very influx moment at Mastercard?
Sure. Well, I would put that in a bit of context, right? So, I began in the sustainability space, 15, 20 years ago, a long time ago, similar to the two of you. And although Joel, I think you're even further decades on me for sure. But as we've been in this space for quite some time, this space is not stagnant, right? Like the evolution is pretty fast when you think about this compared to maybe some other mega trends that are out there. So in terms of like evolving, meeting this moment, when I look back at the 15, 20 years I've been in this space, each year has been vastly different, right? Each month, each week, each day. My job continues to evolve every day. What I was doing yesterday and the pressures and the focus and the science and the data that we have, like that's changing, the next day and beyond. So having kind of this perspective of staying very focused on the ultimate goal, right? What is the impact that we are trying to drive here at Mastercard? What is the vision for our business? How can our programs in environmental and social responsibility help accelerate our business? Like that is what I'm laser focused on, and just staying focused on that long term, but paying very close attention to new information, new data, new pressures, new perspectives, and always folding that in and kind of pivoting, but keeping that clear focus on the long game.
Well, let's talk about that long game, because I think one of the things that's been interesting to watch with MasterCard is that here you are, a company whose most of your revenue, or certainly a good chunk of it, is based on people buying things using a card to do that, and yet MasterCard talks about sustainable consumption. You've done a number of research papers and surveys, and you've been outspoken on that. I'm curious how you square those circles, the two circles, I guess, that are part of your logo, maybe, where you talk about sustainable consumption and have this business model that's based entirely on people making purchases. Talk a little bit about what that means and how you're trying to navigate that.
Well, for us to stay in business, right, to continue to be a profitable growth business, we have to keep pace with changes in consumption trends. So, an example from many years ago, when the iPhone came out, right, think about how that new technology fundamentally changed how people consume, how they buy, a click on the phone for a subscription or sending things to their home or whatever it is. That fundamentally shifted our business. And very similarly, this drive that we see in consumers, in our customers, in our cardholders to want to choose more sustainable products and services, the requests that we see from our merchants on our network, how can you help us, in this evolving space? We know that making more sustainable choices, that is, again, a mega trend that is coming, right? It's growing every day. And if we don't keep pace with that trend, right, that's not serving our business. That's not serving our customers. That's not serving the merchants and the cardholders. So, we are in the business of keeping pace with those trends.
Well, let me follow up on that because I want to just go a little bit below that surface. I did start in this a long time ago, 35 years actually or more, around the issue of green consumerism, what later became known as sustainable consumption. And even back then, there was this question of, can we shop our way to environmental health? Can we shop our way to now sustainability? And I guess a lot of skeptics out there would say that's, talking about sustainable consumption as a credit card company is not really doing the job that needs to be done. So I guess, what would you say to them, and how do you help them understand that you do have perhaps a deeper meaning there?
Well, again, there's a whole ecosystem here, right? This is a systemic change that needs to happen well beyond our own value chain, which is, as we've discussed, pretty massive. So this can't be Mastercard kind of sitting in our own little box, kind of thinking about this evolution of our business model, of the business model of our merchants, moving from more transactions to services, moving into more circular business models. This is like, a big systemic change that takes all sorts of partners and thinkers and stakeholders and actors. So I think we're clear on the role that we need to play. That continues, we continue to innovate. And what does that look like? We already mentioned kind of the fundamentals of our sustainable consumption strategy. How can Mastercard inspire both merchants on our network and cardholders to want to offer and to also want to purchase more sustainable products and services? How can we inform? How do we provide deeper information? Like when you buy something with your Mastercard, you get your bill and you see the price of that, right? The dollar, the financial impact of what you've chosen. But we've also got a product, our Mastercard Carbon Calculator, that helps provide information on the estimated carbon of those purchases. Now, more work, of course, needs to be done. We need to get more granular in that data. And then we also need to work with our merchants to provide that data at the point of transaction or prior, not after you've bought it. But we're in that business of the role we can play to provide better information, more insightful information to inform those choices. And of course, then the third piece of that strategy is enable. How can Mastercard take the friction out of lower carbon choices? And a great example of that, Joel, you and I are based in the Bay Area, and you can't do it here, but you can do it in New York, London, Amsterdam, other places where you want to take the subway system or the bus system. In New York, you tap your MasterCard or your credit card and you go through the turnstile to get on the subway, or you hop on that bus. Still in San Francisco, also in Paris, where the Olympics was this past summer, you still need to stand in line for a separate Metro card or a Clipper card in the Bay Area to take public transportation. A simple act of how payments technology can take that friction out of choosing a lower carbon transit solution. And that's the type of role we see us playing. And back to your point about, our business model, doesn't that seem kind of hypocritical? When you think about, the older business model of when you took the Metro, typically if you lived in New York, you bought a Metro card for the month, right? One transaction with your credit card. Now, if you're tapping 2 times a day on your way to work, on your way home, for example, that's 2 transactions for Mastercard. That's good for our business, right? It's a win-win. It's good for our business. It's good for the transit rider, right? They don't have to stand in line and dig out their other card, or they left their card at home, or if they're traveling to New York and they still have $10 on it sitting, in their house and they've got to bring it with them, making it easier for the customer and of course, better for the planet. So it's a win-win-win all along.
I think I probably have a small fortune sitting on various Oyster cards, which is
too.
what the UK system, the London system used to be. One of what this conversation makes me think about was at Solutions House in New York last year, we did a great session together where we were talking about how we can encourage some of these choices, micro choices, massive choices. Between you and I, on the stage, we came up with this: just better, just make it better for everyone. That sustainability doesn't need to be a sacrifice, that it doesn't need to be a moral choice, that it doesn't need to be some grand gesture that people take ever so often, but could just be a better way of living. I'm wondering if you've had any further thoughts on that since Solutions House, because I was really fascinated by that conversation about the fact that this is never about trying to get people to do the right thing for Mastercard. This is just about making it better.
Yeah, and I think for me, so I have referenced that conversation we had, I don't know how many times since then. It was really a powerful moment. And I think it was that juxtaposition of, should things be sustainable or better? And, we came out with, it has to be both, right? It has to be better. People have to see, just like in that transit example, that, they don't need to carry that extra card, right? It is simpler, it's easier, it's faster, they can save time, and it's more sustainable. So that is exactly where we are focused. And I think a lot of it is about timing, right? So, the public transit sector, for example, they're ready for this technology. Riders are ready for this technology. They've got the tools, they've got their phone with their credit card loaded, et cetera. So it's like the right time for that moment to prove it is just better and it's more sustainable. And so that's what we're spending a lot of time thinking about is, which technologies, which sectors, where are they ready to lean into this new behavior, these new models, where it's win-win-win for everybody, and really paying attention to that.
I fully appreciate that Mastercard is one of many financial service companies, one of a handful of credit card companies, if we can call you that, and that this is an ecosystem, and it does take a village for all of these things to happen, not just financial services, but the merchants and the consumers. My question, Ellen, is what would it take for you, Mastercard, and your competitors and colleagues and ecosystem partners, what would it take for you to go further, faster? Maybe let me try, maybe a slight twist on that, which is that if you were queen of the financial services industry and could wave a wand to make one thing different, what would that be?
Yeah, well, so I'm going to go to another kind of detailed example that is kind of live right now on the network. And it's a place where we're spending a lot of time. And that is, how can we use payments to enable a circular economy, right? So we all know reuse is so critical to the vision that we have to achieve, in our human systems, right? How do we do that? There have been so many different pilots and attempts at this, and there are so many reasons why that system breaks down. But we've recently kind of had a breakthrough, a very small pilot, a place called Blenheim Palace in the UK, just outside of Oxford. Winston Churchill, it is very lovely. Highly recommend it. Winston Churchill was born there. It's an incredible landmark for a lot of tourists to come and visit the palace and the gorgeous grounds and walk around. They have a cafe there, a pizza parlor, etc. Blenheim, who has, targets around sustainability. And then they were also looking at just the tremendous waste that's created from all the tourists that come and buy various, food and beverages. And so they were looking for some new ways to innovate. So they started with hot cups, so coffee and tea cups, and wanted to implement a reusable cup scheme. So they worked with us and a couple of other partners to do just that. So you go into the cafe, you purchase your coffee, it comes in a reusable cup. The attendant tells you that you're going to be charged an extra £2 for the reusable cup. But when you're finished, there are kiosks around the property where you can drop the cup that has an RFID chip in it, put the cup in the kiosk, and then tap your Mastercard or your other credit card, and the £2 come back, right? So, initially when they started this pilot, everybody had to download an app, right? And you have all these tourists from different countries. Do people really want to download an app? They don't. Didn't kind of work. All right, well, they fixed that, but now you still had to stand in line to return the usable cup to get your £2 back. Well, that didn't work because it created these huge exorbitant lines because everybody's standing in line to buy their coffee and then to return their coffee cup. So that didn't work. Anyway, after a year and a half of trying different ways, adjusting, we've now kind of figured this out. And the stats are pretty amazing. So they've seen their cost basis for the disposable cups going from 126,000 pounds a year down 50%. Right. So their CFO is jumping up and down saying, wow, wait a minute. We cut our costs by 50%. How fast can we do this with cold cups, with pizza boxes, with other things? Right. They've also seen a bump in their consumer surveys. So the customers leave, they get a little survey. Because of that small action of dropping the cup back in the kiosk, getting the £2 back, it gives people a little bit of a high, like, I did something good today, something small, but they saw this jump in their survey data. And then, of course, there's also the waste reduction and the carbon reduction that's coming from this. So, how would I wave my wand? This was a case where you had people, a gentleman, David Green, who is the head of innovation at Blenheim Palace, who was not going to give up, right? Like you could say, oh, we tried this pilot and it didn't work because of the app. Okay, we're done. We're moving on. Or we tried the pilot. Our customers hated it because they had to stand in line. We're done. Like, didn't give up. We all sat in, dug in, and innovated until we figured this out. And again, it's that win-win-win. It's a win for Blenheim Palace because they cut their costs by 50%. It's a win for their visitors because they enjoyed their experience a little bit more. It's certainly a win for Mastercard because back to the tapping, it's one tap when you buy the coffee. It's another tap when you return the cup, right? So everybody is winning here. And I think waving that wand of staying focused, not being afraid to kind of innovate in different ways, seeing the problems that come and just, figure out how to overcome it. It is possible. We're seeing this in so many different examples every day. And I think it just takes that extra grit.
Well, it sounds like if you were to wave the wand, what you'd want to create is more tenacious people like Ellen Jackowski.
I waved the wand. I would create more Ellens as well. And I've got one final quick question for you, which is one of the things which is so important for so many people who are listening right now, who are in their own organizations, is keeping their senior management on board with all of this as they go forward. I think we've had a few hints in what you've spoken about, which is you're showing how sustainability is obviously good for the world. It's obviously good for your customers, but it's also good for the business. How are you making the case internally right now for sustainability to stay front and center of Mastercard?
So that's really even bigger than me, right? Mastercard has had this saying, doing well by doing good, right? Doing well, staying profitable, growing the business by doing good, by having positive social and environmental impact on the planet, on people and communities that we serve. So that really is at the heart of the company. So that's not necessarily something I need to, keep doing, but collectively, it truly is embedded into how the company thinks and performs. I've got incredible partners from our board to our CEO to our executive leadership team, all the way down to employees as well, who are very excited and focused on the progress and ready to innovate, right? The product that we use in Blenheim Palace, that's called Mastercard Move. It's payments disbursement technology that was created originally to handle cross-border transactions. Well, who would have thought that Mastercard Move could be a key to unlocking the circular economy, right? And making those disbursement payments from a kiosk versus having to go stand in line, and find the person where you originally bought something, right? If you take that model and the possibility of scaling, some of the technology and the capabilities that we have at Mastercard, it's really exciting. And I think our company sees that. Now, we're innovating, we're wrestling with all these different pilots. We're finding the partners where we've got the momentum. But we're so excited about the opportunity to innovate with the tools and technology that we have.
Ellen, thank you so much. Keep doing well by doing good.
Thanks, Sally. Thanks, Joel.
Well, Soli, that was, and please forgive me, priceless. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. That's just the way I roll. But let's give credit where credit is due. I think that a lot of what Ellen talked about is interesting because it shows the different dimensions of sustainable consumption. We didn't really get into the issue of buying less stuff. That seemed to keep slipping out of the conversation, and maybe because there were more interesting things to talk about, or maybe we shouldn't want to talk about it. But I do think that is maybe for another show. Talk a little bit about the slow build of reuse, for example, and even the apparel companies that have these worn again and fix it up and reuse it kinds of things are pretty small ball still relative to their overall sales. You disagree?
I would say not really. The biggest apparel sales company in France is Vinted. It's bigger than H&M. This was news recently out that now the biggest fashion company in France is Vinted, the second-hand clothing website. And that of course, all of those financial transactions for second-hand are something like a Mastercard can enable. That the difference between a financial services company and a manufacturer's financial services company can make money out of a sustainable consumption. It doesn't matter to them whether it's a new dress or a second-hand dress that they're facilitating the sale of. So the fact that the home of fashion, now the biggest company selling fashion in France is Vinted, is extraordinary.
Okay. Well, as go France, let's hope goes the world. Well, that's a great topic for another episode, but let's wrap this one up. Thanks, Soli, for another great conversation, and thanks to everyone out there listening. Be sure to subscribe to Two Steps Forward wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to Trellis Briefing, the daily newsletter from Trellis Group. Just go to trellis.net to sign up. And don't forget to read Soli's amazing regular musings on Substack. I love them. They're a great part of my week. And finally, please follow Soli and me on LinkedIn. That's it for this episode. We'll see you next time.